Hello, my third grade friends. Today we are doing Unit 1, Lesson 15 in our book. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about when you multiply things by 1 and when you multiply things by 0, and we'll also be talking about some different properties. So what do you notice? When you multiply 1 by 1, you get 1. 2 by 1, you get 2. 3 by 1, you get 3. 4 by 1, you get 4. 5 by 1, you get 5. 6 by 1, you get 6. 7 multiplied by 1 is 7. 8 multiplied by 1 is 8. 9 multiplied by 1 is 9. And 10 multiplied by 1 is 10. What do you notice? If you multiply something by 1, does it change it at all? No, it just stays the same. It's like that number one time only. So it's just the same number, right? Okay, so let's write over here. The other factor is the product if you multiply it by 1. So whatever the other factor is, the product will be the same thing because you're not changing it. It's just continuing to be 1. All right. Patterns of 0. Well, before we do patterns of 0, I'll just tell you ahead of time, spoiler alert, that's called the identity property of multiplication, right? So think about, like, if you are who you are and nothing changes it, like, that is your identity, right? So this is the identity property of multiplication right there. Okay, number 2, what patterns do you see when you multiply things by 0? So 1 times 0 is 0, and 2 times 0 is 0, and 3 times 0 is 0, and 4 times 0 is 0, 5 times 0 is 0, 6 times 0 is 0, 7 times 0 is 0, 8 times 0 is 0, 9 times 0 is 0, and 10 times 0 is 0. Anything 0 times is like that number never happened, right? So if I said I'm never gonna give you 5 stickers, how many stickers do you have? No stickers, right? So anything multiplied by 0 will be 0. This is called, can you guess? The 0 property of multiplication. Right there. That's your 0 property of multiplication. All right, let's turn that page. Let's look at this side over here. So there are certain rules and properties, and these are helpful to know for when you're trying to be playful with math. You got to understand the rules so you know how to play the game, right? So property for 1, multiply anything by 1 and it's that same number. Division for 1, you have a number and you divide it by 1, you have that same number. If you have a number and divide it by itself, you'll get 1. So just a way to think about that is if you make 8 hot dogs for dinner and one person shows up and it's you, how many hot dogs could that one person have? Well, all of them, right? They wouldn't have to share them with anybody. It's just that, like, that original group is the equal groups because you're only going to one person. With this, if you have a pizza that has 8 slices And then you have 8 people who are trying to have some pizza. How many slices does each person get? Well, they get 1 slice, right? Because there's enough for each person to have 1. That number 8 divided by 8 leads to 1 person, or 1 slice per person. The 0 property, we talked about it a second ago. Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. And then if you have 0, and you divide it 6 ways, it's 0. If you have 6 and you don't divide it at all, or you divide it by 0, we're saying here it's impossible. Other math classes might say it's undefined, but basically you can't really do that. If you have 6, you can divide it by 1, you can divide it by 6, you can divide it by 2 or 3, but you can't divide it not at all and get a number as your answer, right? Because how would that work? Okay, and then we're also going to talk about the associative property of multiplication. So before we get into all these parentheses and stuff, association just means like who you're with. Like you associate with your friends from art club. Are you associating with your friends who hang out in the library? Associate with friends who hang out at the wall ball courts. That's like, which group are you with? Okay, so the associative property of multiplication is talking about how you're grouping factors when you multiply. Which number are you grouping things with as you begin to solve a problem? So if we look at these examples here, if you have 3 times 2 times 5, you could do the 3 times 2, group those together, and then you get 6 and multiply it by 5 and you get 30. Or if you'd like, you could do the 2 and the 5 together, that's 10. And then multiply that by the 3, and then you also get 30. So it basically is saying your product will be the same if you're just doing multiplication, no matter which things you group together. So the fancy way of saying that is when you group factors in different ways, the product stays the same. The parentheses tell you which numbers to multiply first. Okay, so let's do these problems together, shall we? 6 times 1, what is it? You know, it's 6. And then that times 2. 6 times 2 or 2 times 6 is 12. Number 4, we're doing the thing in the parentheses first. What's 4 times 2? 8. What's 8 times 2? 16, good. 1 times 5, we're doing the parentheses first. Remember, what's 1 times 5? Well, it has to just be 5, right? Because of the identity property. It is what it is. You know, Popeye always saying, I am what I am. Yeah, he's got the identity property. So 1 times 5 is 5, and then multiply that by 7, 35. 9 times 8, you might be looking at this and be like, oh man, I don't have my nines memorized. It doesn't matter, because what are we going to multiply that by? Whatever it is. By 0. So what does the answer have to be? 0. Just so you know, though, 9 times 8 is 72. But 72 times 0 is 0. It's 72 never. Not even once. So 0. All right. 2 times 3, what's that? 6. 3 times 6 is what? 18. Good. Now here, 0 times 7, what is that? 0. Times that by 6, what is that? 0. So basically 0 in any sort of place in a string multiplications. Doesn't matter if everything else is like a million or like 978,000. If there's one time when you're multiplying that whole string by 0, it's just going to be 0. So you can save yourself time there. All right, number 9. Sean gave 1 nickel to each of his sisters. If he gave away 3 nickels, how many sisters does he have? So that's basically 3 times 1, which equals what? 3. Kara has 3 boxes. She put 0 toys in each box. How many boxes, or how many toys are in the boxes? So she has 3 times 0, and what's that? 0, right? No toys. They didn't appear all of a sudden now that she started putting none of them in boxes. That doesn't make any sense. Number 11. There are 3 tables in the library. Each table has 2 piles of books on it. If there are 3 books in each pile, how many books are on the tables? So that is 3 times 2 times 3. You can decide what to do first because in the order of operations, multiplication, like it's all multiplication, so there's nothing demanding to be done first. Because of the commutative property, it doesn't really matter which one you do first. I like to just go from left to right like I'm reading if there's no parentheses anywhere. So 3 times 2 is 6 times 3 is 18 books. Okay, now let's look at this next page. Like I said, I know it looks like a bunch of fancy lingo, but it's nothing to worry about. It's just talking about the different properties in addition and multiplication, and it's on the same page because they're really similar. The commutative property, we've talked about that before. It's the flippity floppity commutative property. It's just saying it doesn't matter what order you put your factors in for multiplication, what order you put your add-ins or partners in for addition, you're going to get the same answer and it's fine, okay? The fancy language is the order in which numbers are added does not change their sum, and the order in which numbers are multiplied does not change their product. The associative property, remember we talked about association being like how things are grouped or like who you're associated with, right? So this is saying the way in which numbers are grouped does not change their sum. And this is just saying the way in which numbers are grouped does not change their product. So you can group a string of more than 2 add-ins or factors together, and it will be the same. Doesn't matter. Now, the identity property of multiplication, we talked about that. That is having a number and not changing it at all, so it is what it is. That 3 says, I am what I am. I'm 3, right? And so it remains the same. What do you think you do in addition to add something to something but not change the original number? You don't add anything, right? So you add 0, right? So the identity property of addition is just adding 0 because you're not actually going to change it if you add 0. It just stays the same. The 0 property of multiplication, we talked about that a second ago. If you have a number 0 times, then you have 0, right? So if 0 is multiplied by a number, the product is 0. Now, we are going to now talk about which property these are going with. Excuse me for just a moment. Sorry, my nose was a little tickly. Okay. 1 times 9 equals 9. Which property does that go with? Well, first it's a times, so it's going to be one of these. Which one is about a factor not changing, right? This one, the identity property. So that's F. F there. Number 13. I'm seeing addition, so it's going to be one of these addition properties. And I'm seeing the parentheses grouping numbers together. Which one of these has to do with grouping? The associative property, right? Who are you hanging out with, right? So that's B. 5 times 0 equals 0. I see a multiplication sign. So we're looking at one of these. Which one has to do with 0? Turning something into 0. The 0 property, right? So that's G. Number 15. 8 plus 0 equals 8. So it's a plus sign. Which one? Addition, right? And then which one of these has to do with adding 0 and not changing the original number? It just stays the same. The identity property. So that's C. This one, let's skip to 17 for a second. I want to think about this one for a second. 2 times 1 times 3 equals 2 times what times 3? Oh, wait. 2 times 1 times 3. 2. Oh. Now that they added the boxes, I was thinking we were supposed to put another number here for a second, and I got confused, but no, we're still just supposed to put the letter. So, 2 times 1 times 3 equals 2 times 1 times 3, and that is the associative property of multiplication. Sorry, I got a little confused for a second. Is E. And this one, 3 times 9 equals what times 3? Well, what times 3 will be the same as 9 times, or 3 times 9. I just said it. Sorry, it's 9. So that are the two factors getting flippitied and floppitied. Which one is that? The commutative property of multiplication. Okay. Let's turn that page. So we're going to find these unknown numbers or these missing numbers using our knowledge of properties. So 5 times 8 equals what times 5? Now we're not putting the answer to 5 times 8 there. We're finding out what you would multiply by 5 to equal 5 times 8. So what do you think? 8, right? That's just saying 5 times 8 equals 8 times 5. 4 plus 3 equals what plus 4? And remember, with all of these, we're trying to just make sure both sides are equal. So we're not necessarily finding the answer to 4 plus 3, but we're saying what you would add to 4 to have it be the same as 4 plus 3. Oh, 3, right? 0 divided by 8. If you have nothing and you share with all your friends, all 8 of your friends, how many did each person get? Nothing, right? They also don't have anything. Evenly divided. Okay, 4 divided by 4, if you have 4 of something, and you give it to 4 people, how many things did each people get? Each person, I mean, they would get 1 each. Number 22, 3 times 2 times 4 equals 3 times blank times 4. Well, we've got the 3 on both sides, we've got the 4 on both sides. What's missing? The 2. 6 times 2 equals 2 times what? I think you know this one. You put 6, you got it right. Good job. 5 times 3 equals what times 5? So the 5 is on both sides. What's missing right here? The 3. Good. 6 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6 plus blank plus 2. Both sides have the 6. Both sides have that plus 2. It's grouped a little differently, but that doesn't matter because of the associative property, right? But what has to go right here? 2. All right, 11 plus nothing is what? 11. 65, one time only, is how many? 65. Excuse me. 5 times 2 times 6 equals 5 times 2 times what? Both sides have 5. Both sides have 2. This one just needs the 6, and it doesn't matter that it's bunched up differently. Both of those sides will now be 60. 17, never, not even once, 0 times is, I almost said 17, no, it's 0, right? Now we're going to write our own equations that show the properties. So if you're stuck, you can go back and look at all these examples over here and do something similar. I'd like you to give this a shot and see if you write something close to what I wrote. If you didn't, you can cross out what you wrote and put something that I wrote, okay? So pause, go ahead and give these a shot. Feel free to turn back to this page. And this will help you remember the names of these properties, okay? So here we go. I'm going to start now, okay? The commutative property of multiplication. Well, it has to have a multiplication sign. And this one I remember is the flippity floppity one, right? So it's two different factors in different orders. So I'll do 10 times 3 and then 3 times 10, right? The associative property of addition. This one is about grouping, right? It doesn't matter which one you group where. So I'll do 1 plus 2 plus 3. First with the parentheses around the 1 plus 2. And that will equal 1 plus parentheses 2 plus 3. Close parentheses. The identity property of addition is about having a number not changing. It's staying itself, right? So if we have 5, what can we add to that that won't change it at all? We can add nothing to it. Add 0, and it'll continue to be 5. The identity property of multiplication. Multiplication. What can we do with a number if we have like a 7? What can we do to that 7 so it stays 7 with multiplication? We'll multiply it by what? 1. That's right. And it'll continue to be 7. The associative property of multiplication, remember, associating is like grouping. So this is saying that it doesn't matter how you group things that you're multiplying, it'll be fine. So we'll do 1 times 2, close the parentheses, times 5 equals 1 times 2 times 5. Okay? The 0 property of multiplication, well, it's in the name, right? So we'll just take like 999 times 0. You never have 999. What do you have? You got nothing, right? And then the commutative property of addition, this one is that flippity floppity commutative property. So we'll do 10 plus 3 equals 3 plus 10. All right, my friends. I know that sounds like a bunch of alphabet soup, but really these are pretty handy when you're trying to think about how you can solve a problem and save yourself some time. All right, thanks for joining me. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.